to the voters?
If it's permitted under your charter, then it's permitted under your charter. If we're talking about a traditional town meeting process, then I would say that would not be the case, because any traditional town meeting article that's placed on the not placed on the ballot but brought up before the warrant has the right to be debated and amended by the people of the town, unless it is a article that contains statutory language, which might be changing the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5, or deciding to hire appoint the police chief as opposed to elected. There are certain issues where the language is in the statute, and that's the way the language has to be. The same is true with the language that would put in place Senate Bill 2 in a town. That statute 40:14 says that the question shall be, and that's not an article that could be amended.
The only thing that this commission is allowed to look at, what the voters voted on, and I'll paraphrase it because I don't have the exact wording, but was that that shall the town change to ballot voting, or are you in favor of ballot voting for Londonderry? But it sounds, and that's all we're allowed to look at. Cannot, and we've been specifically ordered by the town's attorney that we cannot look at anything else other than that. But it sounds like you're saying there's other issues, like how are citizens' petitions handled, that are associated with that, if we make that change.
Depends on what your charter says. That's right. So if the process in Londonderry is that, if John and Mary Smith want to see a playground built on one of the town commons, and they go out with a petition warrant article and get the appropriate number of signatures on there, submitted as required by the statute to the selectmen, and it gets placed on the warrant and would be discussed or debated at the town meeting, then that's complying with the statutes in RC 39. That's a traditional town meeting process. But if it's a process where you have a city council or town council, and the town council acts as the deliberative body in the town, it's a representative form of government. In other words, the councilmen are representing the people in the town. They make the decisions on the day-to-day affairs of the town. But in the process of doing that, they do create an opportunity so that if the people in the town want to say, hey, wait a minute, we want to vote on this particular issue, there is a mechanism by which they can petition the town council so that a vote can be taken. But that's a different process than traditional town meeting.
So I guess that's a question for the attorney, Brian, is if we, is the narrow scope of what we're allowed to do, are there other dynamics that are affected? And that would just be one example, is the issue of a citizen's petition. Are there other dynamics that are affected that are not already outlined within our charter?
Yes, I think what we have to do there, Steve, it's a clarifying question, because the guidance that he gave us originally, he gave us very specific paragraph references in the charter that we were allowed to address. And it's essentially those paragraphs that wipe out the budgetary process with town meeting and replace it with a deliberative session and warrant to be voted on. His cautionary note about other parts of the charter, we're not able to touch other parts. So the other parts would be things like, right now we have an appointed planning board. We can't change that to an elected planning board. Right now we have an advisory budget committee. We can't change that to an official town budget committee. It's beyond the scope of the question that the voters approved us studying, which was simply, do we change to official ballot voting under SB2? So that part is really driving part of the question about the Charter Commission's authority to recommend for and or against a quorum. So there are people here on this board that would like no quorum. There are people on this board that would like some quorum. And there's not been, I think there's really only a handful of people who've actually kind of showed their hand on that, as it were. So the most part, it's just been a discussion. At our meeting on the 26th, we'll actually be taking a final vote on what we're going to recommend, so that we can get to the process of doing the report. So that's really where this is kind of heading from. So I think we do need to go back and ask a clarifying question to the town's attorney and ask him for, to consult with the Attorney General on providing us an answer.
In his list of recommended for amendment changes, there's nothing in there about
The petitioning process. Yeah, and that's a whole separate section of our town charter. So Kathy, you had a question?
Just one question. So you're saying that town charters supersede state RSAs as far as government issues, like unless it's specific wording kind of ones, right?
I don't want to say town charters supersede state statutes, because generally the statutes override anything that the towns do. However, as part of the charter process, the statutes allow the towns to address certain issues in the charter. So to the extent that the charter establishes how the town government is going to look, and that process is consistent with what the statutes permit, then it's fine. But generally, in state government, Constitution trumps everything. State statutes come next, and then charter issues would come after that.
Dave?
Larry?
Go ahead. Okay.
I just, Dave, when we had our last meeting, we had a woman here who represented the DRA, and when we were talking about citizen petitions, she specifically said that the petitions during the deliberative session could be amended. This is how I understood it, that they could be amended, but the original intent could not be changed, meaning that, like, if you had a certain amount of money that you wanted for for a fire truck, you can't change the dollar amount and make it for a playground instead. When you're talking about amending it, would you say it's the same thing, or you could change it any way that you?
No, I would agree with
Okay.
the DRA's position on that. You can amend an article as long as it's germane, even if it means taking a $50,000 appropriation and making it zero. But you can't take an amendment for an article that calls for building a playground and changing it to replacing the police cruiser. That's not a germane item.
David, just for your reference, Article 7 of our charter, Section D, basically talks about everything prior to that. Basically talks about the initiative petition and how it goes about, and whether you can challenge it or not, legalities and so forth. But D itself states that following the public hearing, the council may, and there's only two things that it may do. It either passes said measure without alteration, or they deny said measure and refer petitioners to procedures referenced in Section 7.2, which basically says that they found something wrong with it and don't think it should be going to the voters, so they're giving them an alternate way to deal with it. So those are the only two things, and this is where it really comes from in regards to the council, probably also the school, basically saying you can't change somebody's petition because it was presented that way, the original 25 or whoever, 1% signed it and so forth, and you cannot change it except for, text errors or, some corrections of that type. So, based on that, again, I guess, not to really put you on the spot, but it sounds to me that it's been done under statute, okay? It even follows the alternate ways to do things based under